Welcome back to another edition of Born to Sell. Today, I'm joined by someone whose journey I've had the personal privilege to watch from day dot one. I wanted to welcome Ryan Palihawadana. Welcome, Ryan.
Hi. Hi,
So Ryan
Adil.
is someone
Thanks for having me.
it's good to have you here, man. So just for the audience, Ryan graduated, jumped into sales with no guarantees. He built a career of hunger, resilience, and pure coachability. So we're diving into the fears, the breakthroughs, and the moments that shaped who he is today. So if you're starting out in sales and trying to find your path, this episode is going to hit deep. Thank you again for joining us, Ryan. Are you enjoying the weather?
Yeah, I mean it's fantastic. I mean, we had a period of sunny, like really sunny and hot weather a couple of weeks ago, and then it was a bit cold and miserable for a while. But no, I'm glad that it's here for bank holiday. What about you? Enjoying it?
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying the weather. It's sunny, time with the family in the parks. Just a bit of sunshine just makes you feel so much better. Get that vitamin D soaked into your skin. But I wouldn't hold my breath knowing the weather in the UK. It may be time to get your brollies out sooner rather than later. But yeah, so let's just enjoy it while it lasts. Excellent. So awesome. We're going to go jumping straight into the first question, Ryan, because I think you've got a great story here. And for the viewers and the listeners at home, I think they can really learn a lot from your experience and your journey into sales. So when you graduated, Ryan, and you stepped into the world of sales, what part of you felt the most unprepared? So not necessarily skill-wise, but emotionally.
I think the part that felt the most unprepared for me emotionally, I don't think there was nothing unique about it. I think I suffered with the exact same issues that a lot of graduates going into sales do. Well, I think just any young person going into sales anyway, because obviously there's not like a graduate degree you can get in sales, so there's no part of you that can prepare for it, even if you do go to university. I think just the confidence, really, the confidence to know that even though, I mean, it's the confidence in everything, in yourself, but then also you're trying to pitch a product that you've only learned, you've only kind of probably even heard of in in your first couple of months, and didn't have any idea what the software I was pitching in my first job was before I actually got to the assessment day or the interview for that job. So it's confidence in yourself, but then confidence in the product, to be honest, because you don't know the ins and outs of it when you're trying to pitch it to a prospect 2 weeks after you've just learned things. So there was that part, but I definitely think just the confidence in myself, felt the most unprepared having stepping into sales. But I think a lot of young people who are just starting in sales will also feel that, because you're just gonna, everybody goes through it. You pick up the phone, just immediately get bullied off the phone by somebody, because they can, if you don't have the confidence in yourself, it comes across on the phone or in anything you're doing, not just in sales. So I think confidence as well, because obviously, as you remember, when we worked together, it was just off the back of the pandemic, so everybody was just kind of getting back into the flow of being in the office again, actually interacting with people properly. So I think confidence was a big thing.
Yeah, I can imagine it can be quite overwhelming for like a fresh grad stepping into the world of sales, a new company. You're now in the big bad world of corporate working, and so it can sort of hit you like a whoosh. There's a lot to learn, a range of different emotions. So leading into emotions, and thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that. Just off the cuff, was there a moment early in your career where you felt sort of completely out of your depth, and what have I got myself into?
A moment early on, I mean, to be honest, I think, to be honest, like pretty much any day, I think, where especially in the first role, you're speaking to these big companies in the mid market who they're turning over 50 to, I don't know, whatever, 500, multiple millions. I think, and when you're prospecting this person, you're picking up the phone to go speak to this, ideally an FD or whoever you're trying to target in the company. I think anytime I did that, I felt out of my depth, because I'm what, like, why? I'm this young guy. I feel like I've done my research on the company, but I think you can never truly shake feeling out of your depth whenever, like that, at that point, getting on the phone. So I think just, to be honest, every day, if that's me being truly honest.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of a wider discussion. I still sometimes feel out of my depth, even in my current role, sometimes. But I think that's just naturally how the brain is sometimes for some people.
Yeah.
You've heard of different people, like feeling out your depth isn't. If you're not feeling out your depth, even in your current role now, then are you truly developing in a way? Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that answers the question.
thanks for being really honest about that. And I think a lot of people go through those emotions too, but they may not necessarily share it, and they sort of suffer in silence, or they keep it to themselves. And I'd say, any sales professional worth their salt have gone through those steps and those range of emotions of self-doubt creeping in. Am I in the right place? Can I do this? Can I not do this? And so it's a daily battle you have to overcome. Are these my limitations? Can I push beyond these limitations? So it's a very natural feeling. And I can say, firsthand, I go through that on a regular basis, and experience. You go through all those ranges of emotions, and you just roll with the punches. You just get on with it, and you just keep pushing forwards, I guess, and you just learn to cope with it and deal with it. So when you jumped into the world of sales post graduation, was that by accident, or was that deliberate, or it was just a case of, because there's a decent salary here, let me jump into that and give it a go? What was your mindset at that time, at that stage of your life?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of different things going on in my head. I think I didn't know what I wanted to do after university. I think maybe I don't know if a lot of salespeople feel that, or maybe it resonates with you, but I genuinely had no idea what I wanted to do after uni, to be honest.
Yeah.
I knew I enjoyed tech. I knew I enjoyed, finance. People say that all the time. I knew I enjoyed, just like, the economy. But one thing I knew I was always decent at was at least speaking to people. Whether it be public speaking, or just in general. I would always be, especially in school, I'd always be at the open day showing people around. But then I also worked like customer service roles. So I knew, okay, well, at least I'm okay at speaking to people, I think. So maybe that's something to do. So when it came to time to apply to things, I think I left it so late, had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was thought, okay, you know what, sales. I was just looking through a list, and I saw the first job that I applied for where we worked together. And to be honest, the salary, I was like, okay, well, the salary. I looked at it. Yeah, if you say to a young 21-year-old, listen, there's a salary like this, the opportunity to earn commission. I mean, I don't, and it's, again, it was straight out of uni. I think most graduates, or most young people will be like, hey, you know what, let's just go for it. I think money was definitely the motivation, because I didn't know what to do. So when you don't know what to do, well, what do I know about myself? I know I want money. So let me just jump into this. So yeah, I think that answered the question. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I just wanted to go for money, but then I also knew that, just through watching different videos in my life, that sales is actually quite an important skill to have. And whether I knew it or not, throughout my life, I was always in that sort of realm of selling, whether it's selling myself or selling like the school I was at or whatnot. So yeah, I think there was a part of me was like, okay, well, I kind of know what sales is about. There's some good money here. Let me see if I can, give it a crack and see what happens.
Yeah, no, I think I had a similar experience, right? Which seems like a lifetime ago, but I graduated in IT and marketing. So I did a joint honors. And, back then there was a big IT boom, networking, peripherals, fixing stuff. And that was the sort of direction I was going, building servers, building machines. And I did a bit of contracting around that too. And then I realized that I don't want to be sort of 40 years old under a desk fiddling with cables. It wasn't that kind of IT I wanted to do. And so I wanted to be the link between business and IT, because I realized that that's where the money is. And so I sort of just stumbled into selling, post-graduation. Again, didn't really have everything mapped out or figured out exactly what I wanted to do, but I got into sales and I never looked back. I loved selling. Now, I mean, there's certain likes and dislikes I like about selling. I love selling. I love serving people. I love helping people, genuinely solving a problem. That's the best part of it. The commission you get off the back of that, it's very rewarding.
Mm.
My dislikes were largely around, the corporate side of, the bureaucracy, the politicking, it was that sort of environment. And so I have likes, but the passion for sales was just there, and I figured
Mm.
out this is where I want to be. And I think a lot of people stumble. I said it on a previous podcast as well. Sales is the ultimate default career path. People just stumble into it a lot of the times when their first choices don't necessarily work out, and it's an
Yeah.
accident that happens, and they never look back once they join it.
Yeah, no, I think I think to pick up on something you said there, I think in terms of serving the clients, I think that's one thing I knew that, because I remember when I was at university, when I was looking around all these careers fairs, there was people like consultancies that came in, and that I remember looking at that, I was like, okay, well, that kind of tickles, that seems like something I'd enjoy. So I think whether I knew it or not, I enjoy client facing roles. Even now, any role I've ever applied to in my, since I've graduated, has always been a client facing role, because I enjoy being face to face with a client. I enjoy the client service you can offer, but I enjoy the relationship side of things. I think
Yeah,
knowing that, number one, you've gone and you've originated your own relationship with the client. You've then gone and found out exactly what they want. You've then gone and served them. And this is, I think, one thing that's changed for me is I enjoy the long-term relationship. I think,
yeah,
which maybe you don't necessarily get at the start of your career in sales, but when you kind of start to go down the line, you start to own the relationship a little bit more. But that's still sales, whatnot. So I think at its core, I enjoyed the building relationship side of sales and becoming somebody's sort of, I guess, go to it with that problem, if you know what I mean. So I think
yeah,
whether I knew it or not at the time, my like of building relationships and trying to be that, I guess, the connector, the relationship sort of the person who just got, okay, I can call this person, they've got a problem, let me solve it. But then to stick with them throughout the whole thing, and then ultimately, I guess, well, they get something, to have a mutually beneficial relationship, whether I knew it or not at the time. That's something that I've enjoyed, relationship building, which I think every salesperson really needs to have. You can't really be a non-relationship building person. Maybe that's quite a binary way to look at it, but I think
no,
most
but
salespeople would agree that they enjoy that.
you've made some good points there, and I think that's the good part of selling. That you think in that way. I think a lot of the times people are put off by the profession of selling. If we talk about Wolf on Wall Street type of behavior or that sort of conduct, we look at salespeople as slimy, self-serving people. People who are keen to shortcut others. Line up their pockets, and the industry's just sort of been tarnished by that kind of behavior. And so I'm here to uphold, sales as one of the best professions there is. Because when you're doing it and you're genuinely serving people and helping them, meet their desired outcomes, it's a blessed role. I think it's fantastic. It's highly ethical. You're exchanging value for commitment, and I think a lot more people should be doing it. To be honest. I don't think there are enough women in the profession of selling. I think it's largely male dominated, and
Yeah,
it'll be good to see more women taking sales up as well as a conscious choice that I want to be a salesperson. Excellent.
yeah,
So just a very quick one off the back of that, and we talked about sort of struggles, etc. But did you ever feel pressure to prove something? Obviously to yourself, because sales is very cutthroat. There's a lot to learn in a short space of time, pressure inducing. But to yourself, to your family, your peers?
yeah. No, I think just if you're that way inclined,
Mm,
generally you feel that anyway in any career you go into. But I think definitely in sales,
yeah,
um, I mean, there is that you need to prove. Well, you need to prove yourself every day or every month by the leads you bring in, and so I think naturally that sort of having to prove yourself environment in any way you go, whether people like to build that culture or not. I mean, sales is a results oriented career. You need to prove yourself with
yeah,
the pipeline you generate. But I think in terms of personally, yeah, I think every day having to prove it to myself that I could do it. Because I mean, yeah, when you're speaking to these people who you perceive as super in the know about their, I mean, they should be in the know about their business, but people who, you know, who are in charge of these multi-million pound enterprises, you have to prove to yourself that you do belong on the phone as well with them and to have that conversation. But then also, like, you know, from a cultural side of things, having to prove to my family that I could do sales as well, because, you know, from a, I'm not sure, maybe this would be suitable to say, but from a cultural perspective, it was, you know, my family were very much always the traditional sort of career routes to go into. So I think having to prove to them as well that it was a viable career is the right choice, and also it helps develop me. I think is something that was definitely on my mind, because there are things I can do now because of sales that people in my family can't do or will feel less comfortable doing. But that comes down to sales, and I think having to prove to them that, okay, this isn't just some sort of Mickey Mouse sort of career. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is a genuine skill here that I'm going to have to prove to myself, to you, to my peers as well, that I can do it, because I think, I mean,
yeah, no, I understand. You broke up a little bit, but I think we got the gist of what you were saying there.
Sales in and of itself it's a completely unique skill to learn. So I think having to prove that to myself, to my family, to peers in the actual workplace, to be like, yeah, I can do it, was definitely on my mind every day.
Yeah, I'm glad you referenced that. You said something earlier about family and, you know, sort of the cultural side to things, and being, you know, ethnically from the subcontinent, right? We have a innate pressure, or an external pressure rather, more so than others, because, you know, as you mentioned, if it's not any of those very noble professions, but sort of cliche in our world in terms of doctor, dentist, lawyer, engineer, you know, if you do anything out of that, you're perceived to be a failure, largely within, you know, the culture. All right, so you always have this baggage that you're carrying around, this pressure that you have to be one of those, to reach the top, and there's no other option for you unless you business it or do something else. And so, yeah, it's I'm glad you mentioned that. So it's good to see that people are beginning to break those shackles. There are other things that you can do outside of that. I mean, I was never groomed to be a doctor. I think it's a very noble profession. You're saving lives and doing things, but I've got zero interest in that. So if you're not interested in any of those professions, what else can you do to reach the same heights of success and make the same, if not more, monetarily, through your career? And so sales was an obvious option. Thanks for sharing that, Ryan, and being vulnerable. And you know, I totally understand a lot of the sentiments that you shared in that answer. What was the hardest battle, Ryan, the internal battle that you had to fight in the first 90 days of you starting your sales role?
I think it goes back to what I said at the start of the call around confidence. The internal battle you have with yourself when you're on the phone is, you know, do you deserve to be on the phone speaking to this person? I think we kind of alluded to it earlier on in the call, but there's that almost imposter syndrome which gets to you when you're not naturally, when it's not a natural thing to call somebody cold, like completely cold. Maybe you've sent a couple of emails to warm them up, to, you know, and then to pitch them product and to persuade them. Like, that's not a natural thing for the, it's, you know, there's elements of sales which are natural, but it's not a natural thing by any stretch to call somebody up and then to persuade them in 10 minutes to get onto a call and, you know, essentially push a concept to them and change their mind on the concept. So I think that internal battle of, like, do I deserve to be on the call, and also, do I actually believe in what I'm doing on the call, I think was a huge internal battle that I had at the start. Kind of not like in my head, knowing, do I deserve to be there, but then also, do I even know what I'm doing on this call? If that's, it's a weird one to word, but, and I think that kind of links, but those two things linked into a sort of imposter syndrome kind of area. I think that was a huge internal battle, because there'll be times where maybe my intro was really good, and okay, then, because I think I remember where we did a call once where you were sat in the room with me, and I spoke to a client, and we had the introduction, and it was like, I don't know, it was like a practice call. We always used to do practice calls sometimes, and you would be there in the room with us, but it was like one-on-one. I think maybe you remember, maybe you don't. And I did my introduction, and it went completely, like, it went better than I could have thought. And I can't remember what my introduction was or whatnot, but the client was well, it was almost like the ideal sales outcome you'd want from introduction. You do your elevator pitch, or you do your whatever sort of summary, like whatever you do at the start of the call. And the client was like, okay, yeah, no, we do that. And I was, in my head, I was like, okay, well, I've got them exactly where I want them. They haven't even objection handled me too much. Maybe they did a little one, and I've kind of got past that. Now I'm in, it's play ball now. And I remember saying to myself in the moment, like, I think then the internal battle came. Okay, well, now you've got them. Do you have what it takes to take them the whole way through? And I think, a good salesperson will be like, hey, now I've got this open green in front of me. Let me just play. Let me just go through it. But I think if you have, that was an internal battle I had, was, okay, well, I've got them. It's almost like the self-doubt that you have. Okay, well, I've actually just done it. But can you actually take it even further now? Like, how far can you push the prospect? Do you know what I mean? And then kind of feeling like you deserve to ask for that 10, 15 minutes at the end of the call. That was something I struggle with. If that's a good answer. Sorry,
no, and that's very real, and I appreciate sincerely being so honest and sharing that with us. I remember at the beginning of my career, I was calling on behalf of Microsoft, and I was calling IT leaders from some of the biggest companies in the world, and I used to get crippling anxiety. Phone fear is probably an understatement. I didn't want to pick that phone up. And I had to really talk to myself and say, because, when you're coming from a position of need, remember, there's an old saying that people like to buy, but they hate being sold to. And so you said something about persuade. We shouldn't really be pushing people to, persuade them. We should be empowering them to come to their own conclusion, for them to make a decision that this actually makes sense for them. And so I had to really change my mindset when I was approaching these conversations early days. I put the bass in my voice, because I'll be speaking to people who are very serious. I sort of have a persona lined up in my head. These people are very serious. They're very busy, low tolerance for BS. They're fighting fires, X amount of hours in the day. Most of them are blocked off because they're busy. And so you have to come at it from that perspective. And so when I'd call, my naturally high-pitched, high-volume style of talking changed completely. I put the bass in my voice. I slowed down the way I was communicating. In my mind, I said, yeah, I'm speaking to XYZ. I'm just a guy on the phone, but I'm an equal, because I've got something of value to give you in exchange for your commitment. And I'm not going to give it to you if you're not committed. And so one of the things I really internalized is, one of the most powerful things you can do in sales is walk away. So, this need and this natural sales sort of inclination I have to push, because I really need this deal, is, flip it on its head. One of the most powerful things you need to do is walk away when it doesn't serve their interests or yours. And so when you approach it from that mindset, everything changes. Your delivery, your demeanor, the way you talk, because there's no pressure on you to close anything at that stage or book a meeting. If they say they're not interested because of XYZ, you might want to do a bit of follow-up, but that's it. But you don't want to push them to a point where they have to bat you off the phone. And so that changed my approach radically. And then the more I did that, the better I got. And then that's when I started, winning, awards and accolades and, recognition and things like that. Okay, so now we're going to transition into breakthrough moments. What was the moment where you finally felt that it clicked? You thought, okay, I can do this. This isn't too difficult.
I think it wasn't actually in my first role. It was probably in my second role, which was that was an FX, foreign exchange, and that was brutal, to be honest. Like, it was what because I think when you're in the mid market, you're selling in a way which is a bit more. There's a holistic sort of style to it, where you send the email and then you and then you send another email, and then you give them a call, and then there's a bit more of a softer touch, and then maybe you try and target people lower down the pyramid, try and get some information, and then you go back up to the decision maker. But in my second role, that was it was just phones every single day. And it was you had to make at least 200 to 250 calls. There were power hours from like 10 to 11, and then 3 till 4 there were power hours where you had to stand and you had to get up, actually physically stand up from your desk. Everybody in the room would do it, so that was a good energy. And you would just have to hit the phones. It doesn't matter if you haven't even spoken to the lead before, just get on the phone and do it. And I actually think, even though that was probably one of the most, that was very, very tough. I remember looking back on that, there was so many different successes from being in that environment. But I was like, okay, well, actually, this isn't actually. It's simply just a case of just getting on the phone and just almost you just face rejection. The rejection's just part of it, and you get on the phone and you're just having conversation with people. I think from that role, so many of my prospects that I managed to convert into a client just ended up being off the back of just having a conversation with them. And it was from that repetition. So I think, I don't know at what point in that role that something finally clicked, but it was just some point in that vague blur of 200 or like probably at that point maybe even 1,000, maybe 2,000 calls or something like that about the span of whatever of that job. I was like, okay, well, actually I can do this. To be fair, like it is just a conversation. And I think, kind of looking back to what you said earlier, that was where it clicked for me that you can just walk away from people. And there were so many times where I was selling to a prospect and they were like, the timing's not quite right, or we've actually got somebody already in place, or we already work with somebody. And I was like, okay, well, at that point, you don't want to. You've already been trying to handle the objections so much, but you can kind of sense in the client's voice, okay, actually, I am starting to push a little bit now. The best thing you can do is, okay, well, listen, this is what we do. I'll send you an email, or I think at that point I got more into the habit of sending people actual like leaflets or like a pitch, like presentation packets to them of what we can do. So at that point, in that period of that job where I was doing so many calls, at that point I was like, okay, well, actually, I can do this, and I found more success with just saying no, walking away from a client, because often that clients actually do respect when you kind of walk away. But then you've left a good impression, and you left a good taste. Where it's like, okay, well, I remember that salesperson. They offered a good service, but they were also quite respectful. They just kind of walked away, and that's when the intrigue kind of came. So I think what you mentioned earlier, that kind of mindset change you had, that was in that role. That's where the mindset change happened.
Especially when I'm a big fan of Power 1 Hours. I know a lot of folks don't like it, but it's what you're doing is you're sort of kicking the crutches. So no emails, no phones, well, no mobile phones, no personal mobile phones. You're just sat there either using your dialer or your desk phone or whatever it is. No social selling through LinkedIn or anything like that. And when you're forced to make calls in that manner, it just becomes a task, right? Initially, it's very scary, but once you do that and get the fear out of your system, it just becomes a normal thing. And so it just becomes a call after call after call. The fear is gone because it's just something you do on a regular basis. And I've always sort of been fond of Power now, because it's one of the sure ways to get people in the infancy of their careers to not fear the phone so much, because it's a key tool. I think what's changed though, Ryan, and how selling has evolved is, yes, I mean, we have multi-pronged approach. Yes, you've got social selling, you have the telephone, you have video, you have all these different sort of mediums of getting in front of a customer or a prospect rather. And so the telephone isn't the primary tool anymore. It's actually part of a bigger sequence. So in those days when you just cold call for the sake of cold calling, hoping to get through to somebody, I think you can still book meetings and close deals, but it's not what it used to be. You can do 100 calls. I think the close rate is like 2% of booking a meeting or something like that. So you got to do 100 dials to get 2 meetings booked. Whereas now the telephone has probably become the second or the third stage of a wider sequence of activities. So you might want to drop a LinkedIn message and connect with them. You might follow up with an email, actually giving value, not begging for someone's time, but actually sharing something of value and say, hey, look, I was thinking, I appreciate you doing this within your company. I came across this article, thought I'd send it your way, not asking for anything in return. And then you might want to call. I'm not saying this is a perfect sequence, but you might want to call as a third step. And then you can leverage that email and that social interaction through social media as a crutch. So we're not strangers anymore. That first interaction we have on the phone isn't so cold. It's a warm interaction. Say, oh, Ryan, thanks for connecting with me on LinkedIn. Or Ryan, did you get that article I sent you the other day? It's almost like a crutch. And so we're not strangers anymore. And if I'm being true to myself, if I look at the teams I've managed in the recent years, a lot of the meetings are actually booked, not on the phone. They're actually booked through email and things like LinkedIn. And so the first interaction that happens is actually on the phone. The first conversation, meaningful conversation that takes place is actually on the phone as like a third step or fourth step. I might be in the market to buy something, but I don't like people hounding me. I was doing private healthcare the other day on Money Supermarket to look for providers. And then the minute I put my details in, I was pestered by dozens of calls from providers. Now, I want to buy, but I don't appreciate these calls. What I would like is some insight into how can you give me some information via email or send me a quote or something, which is easy for me to read, digest, and then if it's meaningful for me, I'll get back to you. It just seems less threatening in that way, at least. Anyhow, I digress, but look, thanks for sharing that. And so if we move into sort of the coaching, we've worked closely together. I've seen, your potential. When we first connected, so how would you describe your mental and emotional state at that point in time?
I was a young guy at that point, 20, 21. I'm still young now.
We're young.
20, 26, 27 this year. But I think just young, immature. I think at that point, mentally, I've always grown up with, I think you're the same as I remember we discussed this, but we've grown up with sports in our life. So I think when you grow up, it's not just a sports thing, but when you grow up having played sports your whole life, you kind of have an inbuilt resilience or an inbuilt sort of headstrongness where it's like, okay, well, it's just, it's a job, it's a challenge. Let me just try and figure out. But I think emotionally, I think, I was just immature. I think immature, and especially when it comes to sales, taking things a lot more personally. I think when you're at that age, though, you struggle to see the big picture when it comes to sales, or when it comes to you struggle to see the big picture when it comes to like prospects, not taking things personally. But then also there's a discipline element to it. I think one thing I've realized a lot in the last couple of years with in whatever role you're in, whether it's sales or a client facing one, or just back office IT stuff, discipline is, your time management is so important that any career you have. If you don't, some people have a different attitude to it, but one thing I do now, and I've, which is a skill I learned in my first role, still have done it at any role I go to, is just managing my time just brutally. Like, if you don't know exactly what you're doing from like, and again, it varies. Some people have a bit more of a fluid diary, but I think when it comes to sales, you need to have time to, again, I'm gonna do my power hour from 8 till 9, or like 9 till 10, or whatever your assigned power hour was, if that's the thing your company. You do that from 9 till 10. Then maybe you say, okay, actually from 10 to 11, I still want to make calls, but maybe I'm not such a higher rate. Maybe work some leads that I didn't get around to in the power hour. And then from 11 till 12, you're doing just your prospecting, trying to find quality leads. And then 3 to 4, doing your admin, or you get the picture.
Yeah.
I think as a salesperson, if you don't manage yourself rigorously like that, you can't generate your own. Again, this is the thing I think companies want now. What they want to do is with business developments, you're essentially responsible for your own pipeline, right? So in order to do that, you need to manage your own time. You need to manage your own leads. You got your set of leads. How do you know which ones have been worked, which ones haven't been touched in 5-6 days, or which ones haven't been touched in 2 weeks? If you're not managing your time, if you're not sticking to a disciplined or structured approach to what you're doing, I think that's something that I've learned.
Yeah, and I think the whole discipline and time management piece is really important, right? It's paramount. There's an old saying, if you don't run your day runs you. So you have to be structured. You have to be working like clockwork to understand, okay, at this time I need to do this, enforce the discipline. It's like the recipe of a cake. You need to make a particular cake, for example. And in order for you to make this delicious cake, you need to follow the ingredients, but follow the recipe of how it's made, follow the process. But if you mess that process up and put the ingredients in different quantities at different times throughout that process, you'll have a very odd looking cake, So it's really, really important to make sure that you own your day and plan accordingly. Awesome. So Ryan, what's one piece of advice? It could be coaching, guidance, of us working together. It could be anything. What one bit of advice or coaching that I may have given you that sort of hit you the hardest? Something that actually sticks with you to this day.
Yeah. I think, and I don't want to sound cliche as I say this, but I think you said it to me, but you said, I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was something to do with, you've got potential in you. The only thing holding you back is yourself. And I was like, well, I was shook. I was like, cause I remember it was after a couple of calls, or maybe after a bad day, and you were like, or maybe it was after a good call. I'm not too sure. He said, see, you can do it. You've got potential. And I just remember it saying, the only thing holding you back is yourself. And I was shook after that. I was like, well, actually, that is true. But it's strange you said that, because throughout my life, even when I was younger, well, I think that it's a very general sort of, not general piece of advice, but I think it resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah.
In that particular thing, the only thing holding me back was myself. And I've taken that throughout, in my other roles, and then when I was doing my masters as well, I took that, and now in this role I'm doing now, I was like, okay, you can do anything. It sounds cliche, but you can do anything you set your mind to, and more often than not, you just need to get out your own way to do it. And that's something that I've always taken is you need to get out your own way, and more often than not, if you find you're struggling in certain areas, or maybe you're not getting, you're not doing as well in your career, sometimes you just need to get out your own way. That's it. Just get out your own way, and the only thing holding you back is your own mind. It sounds cliche, but I think it's true.
It is entirely true, and that's something I tell myself on a regular basis. Because look, if you break it down, if you're worried about how a call goes, or a personal interaction with a customer, or maybe somebody at work, the truth is we're not that important enough, for people to think, you screwed up. So what? Screw up big. Make the mistakes. We're here to learn from those mistakes and move on. I think one of the worst things you can do is not try. And I remember, in the early days of working with you, I see the talent, I see the foundation in place. You've got everything lined up, you're organized, but sometimes you feel like from an external observer, you're holding yourself back, or you're too afraid to try something. And so I had to hear it myself, like, dude, get the hell out of your own way. There's nobody in your way. You got people backing you and supporting you. Like, get out of your. And I think this is another thing in sales. It's exhausting mentally. So you got to battle very hard every single day. You got to handle the rejections. I think with experience that changes, but you got to recognize that rejections are not people rejecting you. They're just rejecting the preposition. The late nights, the all-nighters, the RFPs, a drop of a hat, all of a sudden that you have to submit, and all those things that you have to do is you just gotta go through the motions, and then you start learning to deal with things a lot better. So how did it feel, I guess, leading to my next question, having somebody, I guess, on your side or believing in you before you sort of fully believed in yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it feels good, naturally. Like, because obviously, if you don't believe in yourself, you need the support. I think one thing that's quite rare to find is actually in this day and age, good mentors, or especially good people who are more senior in their career,
Yep.
who can offer you advice. And I actually think it's genuinely lacking a lot in the current workforce, or just whether it's in sales or whatever. It is very, very difficult. I just don't think professionals nowadays, I don't know if it's a case of not wanting to, I don't think it's that, but I think it's just everybody's attention is so being pulled from every direction nowadays that it's so hard to find a good mentor, or to find a senior person who's willing to give the time, or who's willing to push you or believe in you where you don't have that yet. So it definitely felt good. And obviously I think a lot of younger people, they also don't know, or like it's I'm kind of trying to find the best way to word this. But having somebody believe in you before you believe in yourself, it's not just a case of patting you on the back and saying, "Oh, you did a really good job there," and it's just blowing smoke up your ass every time. It's also somebody who can hold you to account a little bit. And that happened in our role, where like maybe there were things I did which are good, and you'd be like, "That was good," and the things I did which are bad, you'd be like, "Come on, man!" Like, not in a rude way, but like, "Come on, man!" Like, you can do better than that. I think that's something that it felt good, and it's not without challenges for the person who's young getting into sales, and there's an ego that has to be taken, that comes into play when it comes into that. But no, it felt good, not just from the encouragement standpoint, but also having somebody to hold you to account, which I think a lot of younger people in sales they want. I think they want, because a lot of these people would go in there hungry for it. But yeah, no, it felt good. It felt good.
Good. And I think that's testimony to the fact that you've sort of introspected, inflected, and you've thought about things to say, okay, well, I'm getting good feedback here, or this feedback is suggesting I need to improve X, Y, Z, and you've gone ahead and done that. And you've progressed throughout your career, and you're doing some really good things now. And we're going to sort of transition again further into sort of mindset, identity, and growth. What did you have to let go, be it habits, beliefs, or people, in order for you to grow and move forwards?
Again, don't want to sound cliche, but I think ego, genuinely. I think because ego plays such a huge part in everybody's life, especially in sales, where your first idea of sales it's not adversarial, but I think if you go about it the wrong way, you treat it in an adversarial manner. You get on the phone, you pitch your heart out. The client, maybe they're or the prospect, maybe they're a bit more fiery and they kind of boot you off the phone. Maybe they're just like, I don't know, it's not for me. Maybe it's just more of a soft rejection, or a harsher rejection. When you're early on in your career, and this happened to me, there was an ego that I had with that rejection, which would be like, okay, I've taken this personally. you've not I've taken it. Is it me? Am I the problem? But I think when you start to go further on in your career, you lose the ego, and you lose the rejection. Like the fear of being like, well, the feeling of rejection is not nice, but you realize, I think you mentioned it before, that it's not personal. And even if you're going into just client facing roles in general, it's never personal. End of the day, you're speaking to somebody who's in charge of a certain function in their business. They've been tasked with X, Y, Z, they've been budgeted a certain amount, or they've got to hit targets by year end. Whatever decision they make is for the best, or to their, what they perceive to be in the best interest of the business. If they've rejected you, in your mind, rightly or wrongly, it's not personal. They haven't said, "Oh, Ardill's calling me. Oh God, I really hate this one business. This one SDR." Like it's nothing personal. So I think once I got rid of that, and again, that happened at my second role. I think purely just because of I think actually towards the latter end of the first role, but definitely in the second role where I kind of got into the habit of, I truly realized that actually this, there is no ego to be had here. Because sometimes I'd end up having a conversation with somebody who, they previously rejected me a number of times, and then I call them again, and all of a sudden the proposition makes sense. It's never personal. It's just a case of timing and business interest. So yeah, I think once I let go of ego, that really helped me.
Yeah, two invaluable lessons you've just shared with us there. And that is obviously one, check your ego in at the door, have that degree of humility, but also rejection, don't take it personally, because we need to get over ourselves, I guess, that fear of I'm getting rejected cells, or we're just one of many people who are doing the same job. So they don't have the time to know us to understand I'm rejecting you based on X, Y, Z. It's, hey, you're pitching something I've got no interest in, or I don't have the time for. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Or we're moving closer towards the end of the podcast, but I had a couple of questions I really wanted to squeeze in. So staying on the topic of mindset, identity, and growth, what's something you're proud of now that your younger self wouldn't believe?
I think the ability just to speak to anybody on the phone, really.
Yeah.
I think I'm not trying to sound, well, I think I'd like to think I can speak to anybody. Let me rephrase that. I like to think I can speak to anybody on the phone now, which I wasn't able to do before. But whether that's from I think not just a sales perspective, but also a client management perspective. Younger me would have thought, well, why am I speaking to this person who's in charge of this multi-million enterprise? Whereas now I speak to people who, maybe they've got assets, in the millions, or maybe they're I don't know, maybe they're in charge of a business which turns over X amount, or they've got an issue. Because now obviously I'm more on the private client side of things, but I think just being able to get on the phone and not to panic and not to feel like I don't deserve to be on the phone. And I think it kind of goes into a lesson we learned. But when you can, on the fly, I think sort of tailor your language to depending to who you're speaking to on the phone, it is a kind of it is, the whole idea of mirroring people. I think it is a learned skill, and it's easier said than done. But when you truly learn how to actively do that, I think that's something that I've definitely been like, well, I didn't actually think. I thought it was just some pseudoscience at the time, but it genuinely works. So I think, being able to speak to anybody on the phone, I think is a thing. I back myself now more. I back myself a lot more now than I used to when I was younger. So I'm proud of myself for that.
Good. You just triggered something, a thought in my mind when you mentioned language. And so is language, like, be it customer services, call center, BDR, SDR sales, whatever industry you're part of, if somebody cold calls you out of the blue and they say, "Oh, hi Ryan, it's XYZ calling from this company. How are you?" When you hear the phrase "how are you," your brain automatically flags them as a cold caller. Why? Because everybody does that. It's so overdone and overcooked. They say, okay, that phrase sticks out. Their neuro associations go up, and they're like, okay, I've heard this. Red alert, you're a spammer or a cold caller from a company trying to solicit business. And I guess, because you said language, I'm seeing this a lot in LinkedIn as well. When I'm getting DMs, a bunch of sales folks, they connect with me. And then as soon as they connect, they pitch slap me. They hit me with a pitch. And that is one of my, makes my, for the lack of better words, let's say makes my blood boil, right? Because they connect with you and then they pitch you straight away with a solution. And, some of the younger sales folks who reach out to me is they use language, because you referenced language and it just triggered a thought. Like, hi Adil, I noticed XYZ. Oh, okay, well, thank you for noticing something about me. As did the last 10 sales professionals who reached out and said the same thing. They noticed something about me. And then they follow up with curious, just like the last 10 salespeople who are curious about something about my company or my business or whatever it is. And so what happens is they're not saying anything wrong, but that degree of familiarity in that language, when you keep using and everybody industry keeps using the same words, be it
Yeah.
prospecting or that industry sort of spammy type of, it stops being special. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
people are following gurus and they're following to the, to the dot where they can't seem to deviate from their scripts. So I'll get 10 BDRs reaching out to me using that same language. I remove them as a connection. And so I think it's using the power of language to say the same thing, think a bit more creatively. I think AI is skewing all of that because AI can come up with some good alternatives, but I think it just sounds very spray and pray. But
Yeah.
using the power of language to say the same thing that you want to communicate, but in a way which is different, and that's what you should be aiming for in sales, like standing out rather than being one of many.
Yeah. I think it comes back as well to the idea of the phone and the multi-pronged approach. I think one thing I learned, especially now, even I've learned this a lot, is that people's attention spans, just because of the way the world has evolved. I think now you're not only competing against other sales, like other companies, to pitch them a solution. You're also, to be honest, you're more often than not competing for their attention span. Even if it's 3 seconds. And I think when people send you a LinkedIn message or an email, if I see an email nowadays, and whenever I write to clients, I don't write a whole blurb, or like, in a LinkedIn message, you don't write like a whole lot. Nowadays, actually, the email you're sending to clients, if anything, now should be is the most straightforward conversational language you can, without putting any slang in there, but it should be straight to the point, conversational, and only a couple lines. I think nowadays, if I see an email like that, which can immediately just show, okay, well, they've shown in the first couple of lines, shown a couple of value, and just, to be honest, get to the point. I think that's where it could be heading. But again, I think that's a personality thing. I'm very much I just want to see the value. I want to see X, Y, Z in a quick line and just get to the point. And I think that's what a lot of, maybe you're a lot more in the know-how about the sales world now, but I think that's something that's missing nowadays, is that sort of, I think salespeople seem to be a bit more real about what they're doing. Like, don't say, "Oh, I noticed this. I'm curious." You're not curious. Just say, "Hey, Ryan, noticed this." Oh, okay. Don't say, "Hey, Ryan, noticed this." Say, "Hey, Ryan, whatever, X, Y, Z." Just get to the point, and let's be real about it. But I think you have to tailor your language compared to the person you're speaking to. But that's why I think the phone is so important. Even though the world's changing, I still think you cut through all the noise. When you speak to the person you want to speak to, from the first couple of sentences they say, you should be able to understand, okay, what kind of person, like, what's the tonality, what's the language style this person's in. If I get on the phone with somebody and they say, "Hi," yeah, and they're speaking, they've got the bass in their voice and they're very to the point, and then I kind of, okay, well, this person just wants me to get to the point. But if they're a bit more cheery, a bit like, and if they say, "Hi, how are you?" then you kind of know, okay, there's a bit more room to kind of spread my wings a little bit here. But I think, that ability, as you say, to change your language, whether it's across email or the phone or like LinkedIn, I think is really, really important. But I think in terms of email and LinkedIn, just people just need to get to the point now, because it's unfortunate, but the attention span is just, well, you're competing for attention now. That's all it is.
I think I referenced that on my first podcast. I think that is the most valuable currency you're competing for. It's attention, and we're always constantly distracted by devices, different things, life happens. And so you need to get to the point very quickly, but, we're leveraging real sales skills for real people. Just be transparent, be direct, be open, and drop the canned sort of approaches that everybody uses. Because I think you need to start talking to people in the way that you normally speak with people, and you don't meet people and say, "Hey, I'm curious," or maybe you do, but so does everybody else these days, or I noticed. Okay, nice of you to notice. So does everybody else notice. So you need to say something similar, but in a way that doesn't sound like everybody else, I guess. And that's where you get your attention. Excellent. And you referenced personality earlier. So, that leads me to my next question. In sales, what personality types do you think, from your experience, work best with sales? You got extroverts, you got introverts. You struck me as someone, I may be wrong. You can put me back in a box if you want, but you struck me as someone who's sort of introverted early days when I met you. So what personality type do you think works best with sales?
I think gone are the days of being a super extroverted person. Means that, let me phrase that. I think gone are the days where only being an extroverted person is the best for sales. I actually think there's a middle way. I think if you're introverted or extroverted, it doesn't. I think ultimately there's going to be a lot of people who say extroverted is the best way to be. But I think if you're somebody who's in the middle, what do they call it, like an ambivert, I think, maybe.
Exactly that. Ambiverts, yeah.
I think those are the kind of people which end up being okay, because it's not so much what your personality is in general, because your personality when you go to work, I think the vast majority of people who agree is that you're not the same person that maybe you are, but you're not completely the same person that you are at work when you are at home, because I'm quite an ambivert person. I think what you said was right about me when I was younger. I was a bit more introverted, but more often than not, when I'm out with my friends or when I'm out in general, I'm extroverted. But when I'm at home, I enjoy my recharge time. But I think if you're just in the middle, I think that's probably okay for a salesperson. Obviously, I think if you can access the extroverted side at will, I think that's the important part. Is when you pick up the phone, you're not introverted or extroverted. Maybe you are just extroverted. I think it's that ability to, if you want to recharge and not say anything for a couple of hours, cool. And if that's what we think being introverted is, keeping a bit more to yourself. But the main thing is can you at the flip of a switch access that extroverted side that you need to get on the call? I think that's the most important thing. It's not so much what your personality. It's not so much what your baseline personality is. It's can you access the personality you need to get on that phone? Maybe like an alter ego, for example. I think whenever I was making a call, you'd almost have to fake it till you make it. It's not me making this call. It's like some really super confident version of myself, almost like an act. I think that was a thing. So that answers the question. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. And so, extroverted, people who are very good at networking, they're very loud, very boisterous, can shake hundreds of hands, start networking really, really well in events. And then the introverted side, where you sort of more quiet, more reserved, more of a thinker, maybe not the best networker. But the cross between the two, as you said, the ambivert, which is you can get the best of both worlds. So you can go in and light up a room if you're in the right setting and it's something you feel comfortable with, or you can be a bit more reserved. You can engage in sort of deeper thoughts. You like your private time. And believe it or not, some of the most successful sales professionals that I've had, the honor of working alongside were actually accountants, believe it or not. So no one would think, oh, you'll have accountants. By profession, they were accountants. But there were some of the best sellers I'd ever worked alongside with. And I think it's something to do with, accountants are analytical. They're in the details, they're in the numbers. They're not necessarily so loud and boisterous, but they're deeper thinkers to make sure everything's correct. And, they like to listen. They'll listen and they'll reflect and they'll analyze. And I think that's got a lot to do with that. But no, it's interesting conversation. I'm sure we can exhaust that conversation in terms of what's better. But I would tend to agree with you in terms of, ambivert. If you can tap into the both as and when needed, that's a recipe for success. All right, final question for you, Ryan. Thank you for your time. But what's one message you want to give to every graduate that's entering sales to hear?
I think the message I would have is to just go for it. I don't know, just do it. I think whatever challenge you have, whether it comes to, I mean, it's more for the phone. The advice I'd have is just, it sounds really bad, but just do it. Just pick up the phone and start dialing now. I don't know.
Just do it.
But just, no, I think to be more serious, I think just to try and get rid of your ego as soon as you can, and know that in order to get better at what you're doing, you're going to have to fail a hell of a lot of times. Especially in the early days, you're going to be facing a lot more failure than you will success. But not to take it personally, because that's okay. Because whatever craft you choose to hone in your life, there needs to be an element of failure in order to get better. And I think one thing I know, a lot of graduates, I think it is a graduate thing. Maybe this could be rightly wrong to say, but I think where you've come from university, where you've got your seminars and you've got your lectures, and then you have your coursework, and it's being at uni and being at work, you soon realize, are completely two different things. University doesn't adequately prepare you for what corporate life actually is like, and what it truly is to enter into sales. I think at uni, obviously you can fail in a couple exams or whatnot, and there's failure elements to that. But I think when you're in work and there's the accountability of, end of the day, you're trying to generate money for the company, it's, the penny drops a lot more. So I think be ready to, come to the conclusion that failure is going to be there. It's okay to fail. The main thing is that you just keep going again and again and again. And I think, accepting that failure is a massive, massive part of your journey as a graduate or as a young person in sales.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And, I've always said, you're going to learn more from failure than you ever will from your wins. Okay. So you're going to fail, you're going to make mistakes, screw up big, get it out of your system, but embrace the failure, because that's how you learn. And if you look at some of the biggest entrepreneurs in the world, they've all failed, multiple times in order for them to, find that secret sauce or that magic recipe where they've started huge enterprises and huge businesses. You have to go through that failure, embrace it, almost wear it as your badge of honor, But you're right. I would conclude also that, it's important to make mistakes, and don't approach life in terms of, sales aside, but life in general in terms of, hey, I can't make a mistake. Life is full of mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes through every walk of life, and you'll learn more from it, absolutely, than you ever will from your wins and successes. Wow, Ryan, that was a powerful conversation, man. Thank you for taking the time out to join me on this podcast today. So to everyone listening, if you're at the start of your sales journey, take this as your reminder. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to get started. This is Born to Sell. Keep growing, keep pushing, keep becoming the person your future self will thank you for. I'm Adil Hussain. Be good, stay blessed, and I'll see you on the next one.